I dare you to." It was very cold weather. There was thick ice on the puddles. The village pond was frozen hard, and the ducks couldn't think what had happened to it. "Can't we slide in the pond yet?" said Tom. His schoolteacher looked up. "Not till I put the notice up," he said. "It isn't quite safe yet. Another night or two of frost and it will be all right. The ice isn't quite thick enough." "But, sir, we saw a couple of boys from the next village on it today," said John. "It seemed to be bearing all right." "I've nothing to do with the boys in the next village," said the teacher. "I'm in charge of you, and I'm not running any risks of any of you falling in and drowning. I went on it myself this morning, and I heard it crack as I walked." The boys grumbled. Surely the ice was thick enough. Why, some of the big puddles were frozen solid. Surely the ice in the pond must be almost solid too. The teacher couldn't have heard it crack that morning. The boys all went home after school that day. They passed the pond on their way and looked at it longingly. Oh, for a slide on it. It was such a nice big pond. You could have a very fine slide indeed. Soon there would be a lot of skating. "My uncle's given me a fine pair of skates," said Tom. "I shall go skating on Saturday, if only Mr. Brown doesn't still think he hears the ice cracking." "I've got a toboggan," said John. "If there's snow on the hills, I shall go sledging. I shall have some fun, I can tell you." "My father's going to teach me how to skate properly," said Tom. "You'll soon see me gliding up and down at 60 miles an hour. "My mother's told me I can fetch my cousins on Saturday. They've got toboggans too," said John. "They'll all come home to tea with me afterwards. I will have some fun." The two boys tapped the edge of the pond with their toes. It felt thick and solid. How they wished they could have just one slide. The other boys watched them tapping the ice with their toes, and they tapped too. "I say, look, there are the two big boys from the next village again," said Tom suddenly. "Look, they're going on the ice." The two boys ran on the ice and began to slide up and down, up and down. The other boys watched them enviously. "Hey, you know it's not supposed to be safe yet, don't you?" yelled Tom. The boys slid up to them. "What's not safe?" said one of them. "Your pond? Pooh, it's as safe as can be. The ice is inches thick. Aren't you boys coming on for a slide?" "No," said Tom. "We've been told it's not safe yet. Got to wait." "Babies, cowards," said the boy, sliding off again. "You're afraid, that's what's the matter with you. Cowdy, custard." "We're jolly well not afraid," yelled John angrily. "It's like your cheek to say that, coming from another village and sliding on our pond. You wait till we're allowed on. We'll soon chase you off." "Come and chase us off now," mocked the two boys, sliding about. "Come on then." One of them slid near to Tom and John. "I dare you to come on the ice," he shouted. "I dare you to." Tom and John hesitated. "Babies, you're scared. I dare you to come," yelled the boy. "We can't be thought cowards, can we?" cried Tom, and he slid onto the ice. John followed. The two boys yelled rude things at them. "Come on, after them," shouted Tom. "We'll show them if we're afraid or not. I always do what I'm dared to do." The other two boys set off to the further end of the pond. Tom and John followed them, claws together, but as they got to the middle, a horrible noise sounded. It was the ice cracking. The weight of the two boys' claws together had been too much for it, for there was a thin place just there. An enormous crack had come, which widened quickly. Icy blue water showed. Tom was sliding and couldn't stop himself. He slid right into the crack and fell into the water. Poor John followed him. They yelled as the cold water crept up to their waists. "Help! Save us! Help!" they yelled in fright. They clutched at the cold edge of the cracked ice, but it was so cold and slippery they couldn't hold it. The two boys from the next village took fright and fled away. The other boys, Tom's friends and John, stared with frightened eyes. "Fetched help!" cried John. "Quick! We'll drown!" One of the boys darted off. He raced to the nearest house. There he found a sensible woman who, carrying a long ladder, came as quickly as she could to the pond. She laid the ladder down flat on the ice, and it reached the two boys. "Get hold! Clamber up!" she shouted. Tom managed to clutch the last rung. He turned and pulled John there too. The two boys were so icy cold they could hardly use their hands. But soon they were trying to clamber along the ladder that was lying flat over the icy pond. They reached the woman, and she pulled them quickly onto the bank. "Silly boys, going onto the ice before it was fit to bear," she scolded. "You'll catch your deaths of cold. Where do you live?" "Not far off," said Tom, whose teeth were chattering so much he could hardly speak. "We can run to our homes, both of us. Thank you for your help." Shivering with the cold, the two boys got to their homes as quickly as they could. Their mothers were shocked to see them so wet and so cold. Quickly they stripped off their dripping things and bundled them into warm beds and gave them hot drinks. But it was too late. The next day both Tom and John had terrible colds and coughs. They felt very ill. They didn't want anything to eat. They were ill for 3 weeks. During that time the pond froze very hard, and people skated and slid all day long. The snow covered the hills too, and everyone went sledging and snowballing. The boys and girls at the village school had a wonderful time. When Tom and John were better at last, and able to go back to school, the snow had melted and the pond was water again, with ducks swimming happily on it. The cold weather had gone for good, and the 2 boys had missed it all. How upset they were. Their schoolmaster welcomed them back, but he didn't seem at all sorry for them when they grumbled that the cold weather had gone.
"You deserve to miss it," he said. "You were very disobedient."
"Sir, we didn't mean to be," said Tom. "We were going to obey you, really we were, but the 2 boys from the next village called us cowards for not going on the pond." "Yes, sir, and they dared us to," said John. "They said, 'We dare you to, come on, we dare you to.' So we just had to go on, you see, sir," said Tom. "If they dared us, what else could we do? We had to be brave and show it."
"Now look here," said Mr. Brown. "Let's get this silly daring business right. You were going to be loyal and obedient to my wishes, but someone else that you don't know and don't care twopence about comes along and says, 'I dare you to,' and you throw away all your loyalty and common sense and do what they dare you to, simply because you are afraid they will think you're cowards."
The 2 boys looked at him. He went on, speaking in his low, even voice.
"You were so afraid they would think you afraid that you let your fear of their scorn conquer you, and you did the silliest thing you could do. You went onto a pond that didn't bear. Not very daring, Tom and John. The really brave thing would have been to say, 'Think us cowards if you like, but we've promised not to go on, and we're not afraid of keeping our promise.'"
"Yes," said Tom, suddenly seeing that Mr. Brown was quite right. "The thing we thought was brave wasn't. It was just silly. We did it because we were dared to do it. A really brave thing would have been to laugh and not to go out on the ice. I see now, sir."
"Good," said his master. 3 weeks in bed will be worth it, if you see the difference between a silly dare and loyalty to your promise. I hope we get some cold weather again, and we can send you off to slide and toboggan after all."
But the cold weather didn't come again that year. It was a pity, because the 2 boys had to wait until the next winter.